Two absolute classic college football semifinals, and today on the Huddle, we're going to talk that final. Michigan against Washington, preview and picks for that. We're going to be talking, of course, NFL Week 18, the last week of regular season football before we get into the playoffs. And we've got New Year's sports betting resolutions that we make and that you should be making at home as well to enhance your betting experience and make you a smarter bettor. Let's huddle up. Let's go. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Huddle, and Happy New Year to each and every one of you out there. And Happy New Year to you, Tony, my co-host, Tony Farmer, at Tony's Market Tips. How did you ring in the new year?
It was fun, man. For New Year's Eve, went over a friend's house. He's got a great view over the water here in Austin. Nice high-rise condo. It was lovely. But right off the top here, Andrew, I want to make this very, very clear. I think this is very important. I want to say this slowly so that everybody hears me. I'm reporting as eligible to start the show. We got that on record, okay?
It's hilarious because apparently the league had to send videos out to remind players and teams to make sure they do report as eligible receivers. Like, insanity in 2024. Like, we're 3 days in and it's just chaos already. But I'm glad that you reported in as an eligible receiver. I don't know if you make, authentic personal life New Year's resolutions, but let me ask you as a sports bettor, two-part question, I guess. Is there anything that you, Tony Farmer, will vow to do in 2024 to become a better sports bettor or more responsible or enhance your experience or anything like that? And the second part to that, is there anything out there for the folks at home, new bettors, veteran bettors, whatever, that they can do to become a better bettor or enhance their experience?
Yeah, I'd say for me personally, man, I really want to network more and network with other handicappers, with other sports bettors. It's something that I've started to dabble in a little bit on Twitter. And I'd say I've got like a good breadth of people, but not like a lot of depth. Like, I don't have any really, really close friends in the industry that I can just pick up the phone at 11 o'clock at night and bounce an idea off of and stuff like that. And so that networking piece for me will be big. For other people, yeah, man, I think there's a couple really good ones. One, shop around. Really get in the habit of shopping around. And if you're a bettor out there and you've only got one sports book that you use or one app that you use, I'd say that's a problem. One, because you want to make sure that you're getting the best number. Two, different books have different options, different kinds of bets that you can put in. Oftentimes different bonuses and things like that as well. And so you don't want to be just married to one book because you're not necessarily getting the best number. How about this one? Only bet NBA games last minute. And this is on my resolution list too, man. Like, come on. How many times have you put in an NBA bet and then there's a load management thing right before tip-off, and you wish you had that number, the line moves, there's all sorts of steam on it, and now you've got a bad number before the game. So that's happened to me one too many times, and it seems to be getting worse. This problem in the NBA is getting worse, so be careful with that one. This one is one that I've been preaching for years. Don't bet a game just to bet it. Just because you're bored, and it's the only game on television, and you happen to have Thursday night off, and it's rare, and you want to put your feet up, bet a game because of your conviction and because you have an edge, not just because you're bored. That's probably the biggest one out of all of them. And then lastly, track your bets. There's a bunch of software companies out there. I don't necessarily want to plug a particular one. There's a bunch of them, or even on an Excel spreadsheet. However you track your bets, make sure you're tracking your bets. I think if you do those things, on a regular basis, I think you're going to be starting 2024 off in a better place than you were 2023.
So I feel a whole lot better about two of mine. My two that I had, I need to be diligent about shopping around for the best line. I'm one of those dudes that does have, 2024, I think our sound effects budget has gone through the roof. Already dropping some new sound effects. But I'm one of those dudes that has multiple accounts or multiple sports books, but I really only use one. I log in, in the afternoon or the early evening or whatever, and I make my bets. But I really need to be a bit more about, having funds across multiple books and looking for those best lines or looking for the best number. And then second one was tracking bets and being more diligent about keeping track of my own data. And a third one, I don't know if I'll get there this year, but one that people, and definitely people who are better at math than me, should be doing is potentially doing their own models when it comes to sports betting. I'm sure you're a dude that has his own model, but that's something that I'd like to get into. I don't know if 2024 is going to be the year, but definitely something on the radar for the future. Do you have a Tony Farmer sports betting model?
For NFL, I do. Yeah. It's kind of a bottom-up model that I use. And you're constantly tweaking this thing as the season goes on, like with unders this year, you had to really take that into consideration and tweak things as the game changes. So with the NFL that I do, it's really not an easy thing to do. It's one of those things that's easier said than done for sure. But yeah, it's a good thing to have a foundation to base your opinions off of. It's huge.
But something that requires work throughout the season and along the way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you're constantly, this gets into the networking thing for me, why it's so valuable for me to network, to be able to pick up the phone and be like, hey, my model's off. I'm losing more money than usual in the NFL. What's going on? Oh yeah, me too. Well, what I did is I tweaked this and it seems to, have worked out and now it's a little more accurate, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I want to start here with a quick little recap of the college football semifinal games, which, I mean, both were just fantastic, incredible football games. I know you haven't been a huge college football guy this season, but did you check those games out?
Yeah, man. Classics. I mean, what more could you ask for from those two games? And let's stop for a second and let's give the committee a little bit of credit. Now, you can argue, people can still argue if they want, that Florida State should have edited it, even after Florida State getting blown out. Okay. But if part of the committee's responsibility is to give us good football games, and I think unofficially it is, they hit their target, and we cannot complain one bit about those two games we had. It was incredible.
Yeah, both games. What did you think about that last play from Jalen Milroe and Alabama? Pretty bizarre play call, I want to say.
Yeah, man. Like, was that an option? It felt like he was moving too fast almost. Like his mind was made up, And it seems like if that ball went out to the left there, they would have had a lot more success. It almost, I could be wrong. It's really unfair for me to get in his head. It almost seems like he panicked.
That's what it looked like.
Like a quarterback going back, and he has 5 reads and he already makes up his mind before the play, and that's where the ball goes. Like, it almost seems like he panicked. The moment was too big for him, and he's just like, this is comfortable to run. I'm going to try this. Yeah, it seems like there wasn't a lot of thinking in that situation, but maybe unfair of me to say. That's just my perception.
A great overtime touchdown by Corum there for Michigan. Both games highly entertaining. Both games could have gone either way. So now we've got Michigan as 4.5-point favorites. The total is 56, which I believe is up 1 point from just yesterday. Classic offense versus defense matchup here with Michigan against Washington. Classic stellar defensive front versus all-world offensive line. I'm a bit surprised by the number, to be honest. Like, I feel this one should be field goal at most here. Based on what you have seen, do you feel one way or another about picking a side in this, or are you even going to bet this game?
I don't have any bets in right now. If that total keeps going up a little bit, like 57.5, I might have to get in on the under. I'm curious from your perspective, though, because kudos to you. You were on Washington last week as well. You also sprinkled in a little bit like Washington could win the national title game. So my question for you, it sounds like you like Washington this week. Do you like them more this week, the matchup, even more than you did last week? Like, how do you compare those two?
I'll have a pick here at the bottom during the pick segment. I'm going to say no. I think this one is, obviously Texas-Washington was close, but I felt like Washington's defense could hang a bit better with Texas's offense. Like, whenever Washington scored, Texas answered right back. And that was a bit surprising to me. I felt like Washington could have done a better job handling that Steve Sarkisian offense. And they played well, and they were able to run the ball quite well. So I was a bit surprised with just how close that one is. So I expect a close national championship game. I will have my pick at the bottom of the show, though. But I'm very excited for it. I thought Penix was all world in that game against Texas. Some of those throws he made to Odunze, like to McMillan, like just on the ball all game. Real, like it's one of the things I picked on was, Penix's leadership and his veteran presence that he brings to that huddle and to that locker room. And he got the job done. And I'm expecting a bit more for that national championship game. Fourth time, we've gotten number 1 versus number 2 for the CFP National Championship. Number 2 seeds, Tony, are 3-0 in those games. That was Clemson twice and Alabama once. Only 3 of the last 9 national championship games were 5 points or less. Everything else has been pretty much a blowout. I mean, last year, of course, the freshest one in the memory. And we got to keep an eye on Washington running back Dylan Johnson. I don't know how, but he is expected to play after picking up a knock and being carted off the field after the game, after that win over Texas. Massive for Washington, not just in the ground game, but also just in terms of pass protection as well for that team. So just keep an eye on his status here as the week plays out. But again, I will have a pick the bottom of the show. Some of you potentially won't be surprised where I'm at. Now, you'll have to drive the bus here a bit, Tony. I did not get the chance to tune in to Week 17 NFL as much over the break, but what were some of your takeaways or notes from Week 17 moving in to Week 18?
All right, first off, some criticism for the NFL. We had 10 early games in the early slate. That's too much, man. That's too much for anybody. So I've got a nice setup here where I've got multiple screens. I'm watching the games. I had 9 screens going, and that counts a laptop screen with 2 games on it. And I still couldn't get the 10th game. So I get it, NFL, you're trying to reduce the Thursday and the Monday games this time of year to even the playing field before the playoffs. But can we even put some of these like early games in the late slates? It's too much, and it's frustrating. So that's my first little beef there. The other big storyline.
The question is, before you get to your second, which game did you leave out?
It was that Eagles game. It was the Eagles game, and I would just keep an eye on it. I had like the tab on my laptop, so I would go back every once in a while. But yeah, man, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. The big takeaway, though, I think, is the 49ers clinching that number 1 seed and the Eagles losing to the Cardinals. By the way, that was really, I don't know if you saw this clip being a Niner fan, but did you see the clip of, it was Debo and a couple other players watching on, I think it was Mike Silver, one of the NFL reporters' phone, like in the tunnel. They watched the game come to a close and they're like celebrating with him and stuff. It was pretty cool.
I didn't see that. That's cool, though.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. But yeah, I mean, that's just huge for that team, especially. I think the 49ers are a team that their health is really important to them.
Yeah.
Like any NFL team, that's true. Don't get me wrong. But like we've seen how bad this team looks when Deebo Samuel's out, right? When Christian McCaffrey's not 100%. And by the way, he's not right now. He's dealing with a little lingering calf issue. So for that team to, one, not have to go on the road, to say Philadelphia or Dallas in the playoffs, but more importantly, to have a week of rest, and maybe we'll call it a week and a half or 2 weeks of rest, depending on what they do here coming up. I think that's absolutely huge. So that was, a really, really big takeaway for me this week.
Worth noting that Brad Allen and crew are being assigned the Steelers-Ravens game. Of course, this a week after the whole Lions-Cowboys stuff that went down over the holidays. Your thoughts on the Russell Wilson Denver Broncos situation?
All right. So I've been a big Russell Wilson critic in the past, okay? I think he's cheesy. I think he's corny. I think he's not genuine. I think he tries too hard to seem like this great leader. The whole high knees comment from a couple years ago on the plane, everybody else was resting on the plane and I was doing my rehab. I think he kind of puts himself out there as better than everyone else. So I've got a lot of criticism with Russell Wilson. Not my favorite guy. That said, he's getting a raw deal here. since when in the NFL does a team that has playoff chances, not the greatest playoff chances, but absolutely alive in the playoff, bench a starting quarterback strictly for financial reasons? And nobody's going to convince me that this isn't 100% because of financial reasons.
Yeah.
You want to argue that they're going to have a better chance of winning with Russell Wilson on the bench? Come on. This is purely fun. And when is that appropriate? Do you think the NFL likes this? You think the NFL commissioner's sitting there going, oh, this is cool. I'm okay with, you think the NFLPA likes this? You think Broncos fans like this? Like, and we're just kind of accepting it. Like, oh, I get it. Like, he could get hurt and it could hurt the team financially long term. Like, I'm just used to the NFL that I grew up watching. If you had a sliver of hopes to win the playoffs, you do whatever it takes. Even those crazy scenarios we have, like where, oh, you need this team to tie and you need this. They're playing hard because the payoff of getting to the playoffs and maybe winning the Super Bowl is such an allure that you do what it takes to win. You don't bench your starting quarterback for financial reasons. It's a bad look for Sean Payton. It's a bad look for the Broncos. But what I think is going on behind the scenes, speculation on my part, I think Sean Payton has probably not liked Russell Wilson. He probably rubbed the wrong way by Russell Wilson like I am as an outsider. And he's probably, holding that bias against him here. But it's a bad look.
Yeah, maybe that might be a good point, but surely to God, Sean Payton and Russell Wilson being around this league for so long, Sean Payton would know that character of Russell Wilson and wouldn't have taken that job. Or maybe, I don't know, like maybe this was a grand plan all along. It is certainly peculiar, and you're right, man. How do you take this as a Broncos fan with that, sliver of hope to make it to the playoffs? And, the Dolphins game earlier in the season notwithstanding, the team has played pretty well. The defense has been okay. A lot of those bad defensive numbers are inflated by that Dolphins blowout earlier this season. It's just very weird. You talked about potential scenarios and stuff, so let's get into that here because Week 18 has a few of them on tap. No team, though, has a more stressful Week 18 than the Buffalo Bills. They could get the number 2 seed, or they could miss the playoffs completely. The Colts and Texans is basically a playoff game here. The Steelers are alive but need help. Bucs and Pack in the NFC are in with victories. And then we've got the Seahawks, Saints, Falcons, Vikes, all still around. Any of these matchups sort of more intriguing than others for you?
Yeah, I want to see what the Jaguars do in a game that they should win. Spoiler alert, I've got a little pick for you at the end of this involving this game. But this is a game that they should win, but I don't think anybody would be surprised if they flopped and lost this game outright, even though they're 5.5-point favorites. So you've got Trevor Lawrence probably not playing 100%. You've got Mike Vrabel, who's a very motivational coach, right? In a spot where they've got nothing to play for. It's a division matchup. So that's pretty intriguing for me as well. Now, while I criticize the NFL off the top about the scheduling, I like the games they got on Saturday. They could have put the garbage games on Saturday and squeezed all the good stuff on Sunday, like put Jets Patriots on Saturday or something like that.
Hide it.
But I like that we've got 2 meaningful games on Saturday. How fun is that Colts Texans game going to be to watch?
Big time stuff.
I mean, are we not all secretly rooting for the Texans to be in the playoffs so that we can see what CJ Stroud does in the playoffs with those young receivers? I mean, this is, Peyton Manning, first couple years in the league potentially. I don't want to crown him yet, but we may be looking at that. You got to want to see this rookie in the playoffs. So that's going to be a fun one to watch for sure.
And I know you have, I'm not telling any tales out of school here, but share your Super Bowl futures bet that you've recently made.
Yeah, so I don't usually share my bet sizes, but I'm going to do it on this show. $333 on the Texans, a little sprinkle, to win 46 grand, you guys. 46 grand. One, this was the best number out there by far. So I love that I'm getting good value from that standpoint. But is the AFC not as wide open as it has been in a while?
Typically, it's been like,
Yeah, it's like Chiefs or Bills, Chiefs or Bills, Chiefs or Bills. And it's like, even if the Chiefs fall, the Bills will slide in there. You know what I mean? Maybe the Chargers, when they got Herbert in the playoffs, something like that. You're in a situation now where people are starting to say, maybe Joe Flacco could go to the Super Bowl again, because the AFC is so wide open and all of these teams have flaws and have looked vulnerable at different points in the season. So is this not the year in the AFC to take a flyer? And when I look at those flyer possibilities, there's nobody I feel better about than this Texans team. This is a team that has struggled with injuries on both sides of the ball all season, and it seems like they've never been fully healthy. It's like, oh, Tank Dell's playing, but Nico Collins is out. Oh, okay, now they finally got their receivers, but Will Anderson's going to be out. Oh, Jimmy Ward got concussed again. He's going to miss 2 games. It's like they've never had all the pieces together all at once, and I think there's a chance they may. And if the Jaguars stumble, which I want to make very clear, I think they could this week, and if the Texans win their game, which I very much think they could this week, the Texans could have a home playoff game to start things off. So the path is there for the Texans. And remember, when you're making these long shot bets, they don't have to win for you to make money, because you can use this as a hedge opportunity. If the Texans are in the AFC Championship game, and I know there's a lot of ifs, but there's going to be a lot of ifs when you're talking about these long of odds, okay? If the Texans are in the AFC Championship game, and I know I'm 2 games away from winning 46 grand on this bet, I can start doing some interesting creative hedging at that point in order to peel some profit away from this bet. So I love that one.
I do too. We've been high on the Texans early, like week 4, week 5, very early in this show's infancy. We've been high on D'Amico Ryans as 2 49ers fans, and the job that he has done with this roster and the expectations going into the season were minimal for this team. So what he's done has been incredible. C.J. Stroud, one of the great rookie quarterback seasons of all time, certainly in the conversation. You're right. I think Baltimore is clear on top of this conference. It looks like they've only strengthened. Those wins over the Niners and the Dolphins have made this team a legit threat. But beyond that, beyond the Ravens, the Dolphins, there's cracks in their armor. Buffalo might not even get in. Joe Flacco, I don't even want to live in a world where this dude is back to the Super Bowl. Like, if he can do that with Cleveland, we might be living in a matrix. I don't know. The Chiefs, we've talked about their flaws and how they're not the same. So it is completely doable, man. Like, I love that bet. Watching this team in a playoff run will be incredible. They still work to do. They still got to beat the Colts, but very intriguing what's going on there.
Andrew, do you agree with me? Like, you and I are on the same page that D'Amico Ryans he's my vote if I was voting for Coach of the Year, but I also don't think he's going to win. I think I'm in the minority and other people are going to value other stuff more than me. So do you think he's a good bet at this point, or do you just think he should win, or both?
We talked a little bit about this ahead, for our production meeting for this. You raised some good points. Like, I would have thought 100% he's a good bet. But you're hearing, murmurs and rumblings about some NFL writers that have votes that aren't going to vote for this guy, that are going to vote for dudes like Dan Campbell or, whomever. If I had a vote, it would go to D'Amico Ryans. I don't even think it's a question. Like, I'm actually kind of surprised that we are in the minority.
Yeah, I agree. It makes me feel like it's not a good bet at this point, but I think he should win. Just compare. I mean, Campbell, what were the expectations for the Lions before the season started?
They were favorites for the division.
By everybody, not just one or two people. It was like a consensus. And you brought this point up recently, so I'm going to steal a quote from you. The Texans were believed to be the Cardinals of the AFC. Would anybody have been shocked if they finished the year with 3 wins?
Yeah.
No, and you couldn't have blamed D'Amico Ryans for that either, because the cupboards were bare. These guys, I mentioned Tank Dell, Nico Collins, etc. Like, nobody really considered these guys above average players, and they're playing well above average. And let's give a ton of credit to Stroud, but also let's give a ton of credit to D'Amico Ryans, who, by the way, won a game with Case Keenum, who was believed to be his 3rd string quarterback. How about that decision alone to say, sorry, Davis Mills, I know you've got starting experience, know you're higher on the depth chart. we're going to go with Case Keenum. I mean, that decision alone was pretty brilliant and worked out for him. Man, D'Amico Ryans, he's got to win this, but I don't think he's going to, sadly.
Like, who else is in the conversation then? Like, okay, yeah, if there's NFL dudes out there that are on podcasts or, being interviewed on TV and they say or are hinting that their vote is for a dude like Dan Campbell, but who else would be in the running then? Like, who else is there?
Stefanski,
Yeah.
you've got to give some consideration to, and that's
Sure.
fair. If he won, I wouldn't be like D'Amico was robbed. I'd respectfully disagree. But if Dan Campbell wins, I think he's robbed. You got to throw Shanahan out there, right? Lock up that number 1 seed, even though, like Campbell, the expectations were high. The 49ers have had such a prolific offensive season where you've got multiple players in consideration for MVP. It's kind of like, okay, if you want to throw shade at Brock Purdy and say he's not deserving of the MVP because of the talent around him and the system he's in, then maybe you've got to consider the architect of that system and the guy who's calling the plays as the coach of the year. Like, how can you say, nope, it's not Shanahan for coach of the year and it's not Brock Purdy? Like, someone's causing that to be a extremely prolific offense. Yeah. So I think you got to throw Shanahan out there as well. But Stefanski, I think, would maybe be my 1B after D'Amico Ryans.
That's fair. I can get behind that. Last thing I want to touch on before we get into some picks here. Of course, it's week 18, and one thing that's gotten popular down the years is it's sort of like contract incentive week. It's the sort of last chance for a lot of these players, skilled position players, to hit targets that are built into their contracts. Is this something, I don't know how to phrase this question, but is this something you're buying into if you are going to bet player props for the week or anything like that?
100%. Yeah, it absolutely is. And the cool thing about the internet these days is you don't need to, go on to OddsShark, find your resources. Someone else is doing this work for you where they're digging through these contracts and they're finding you these incentives. And it matters. One, from a motivation standpoint. Chris Jones, for instance. This guy can make $1.25 million if he gets 1 sack this week. You don't think that's going to make Chris Jones study the tape for the offensive lineman that he's going up against? You don't think he's going to have a little more juice in the fourth quarter if he doesn't have that sack yet? It absolutely matters. And then motivation angle aside, how about a game planning angle, especially if you're in a situation where the game doesn't matter for the playoffs. If a quarterback, let me use a real example, for instance. Dalton Schultz, 4 catches, he gets an extra $250,000. 6 catches, he gets an extra $500,000. Okay? Of course, for the Texans, winning is going to come first, especially in a big game like that. But let's say they're up 2 touchdowns or they're down 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and they got no chance of coming back. That matters. These guys are friends. CJ Stroud is going to want to hook his buddy up. These players absolutely know these things going into the game. By the way, Dalton Schultz 3 times this year has had 6 catches or more. So this is very much in play. So I would encourage people to know what these incentives are. Ask yourself how realistic they are. Because on these lists, you might see so-and-so needs, 210 rushing yards. That doesn't excite me so much. Are they realistic? And in game script wise, will there be an opportunity for them to hit those marks? But yeah, I think for people that like to parlay these things together, even though at the top of the show, I'm not a big parlay guy, this is one of those rare times where I believe you have an edge on these incentives. So this would be a time where if you want to parlay some of these player props together, I think that's a fine idea.
Nick from the OddsShark staff will have an article on this topic either today, we're recording this on a Wednesday, or tomorrow on Thursday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. There's other dudes out there that, will be looking at this week. A guy like Baker Mayfield, who's already earned $1 million in playing time incentives, that apparently could double with a trip to the playoffs. There's $300,000 each if he finishes in the top 10 in the NFL or top 5 in NFC in multiple quarterback categories like passer rating, TD passes, passing yards, completion percentage, yards per pass attempt. So that will be, that's interesting. Like with a dude like that has this incentive-laden contract, but also quarterbacking a team to potentially get to the postseason. Do you think he has sort of an eye on those incentives, even in a close game?
I think for something like that, for a quarterback that's already making, a lot of money, it might be a
Bit different?
a little bit different in that situation. But I mean, let's go back to, we saw this play out with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. We all knew what the incentives were going into the game. We all saw Tom Brady forcing the ball to Rob Gronkowski. I wish I remember what year this was. It was a couple years ago. And the way they celebrated after they hit that milestone and Gronk got money, there's no doubt in anybody's mind. So these things happen. I don't think you'll ever catch a player on camera admitting that they put these incentives ahead of their team winning the game, but it's there. They know these things going in. Their agents are reminding them of it before the game, I'm sure, if it's somehow not on their radar already. So yeah, it matters.
Clowney, 750,000 bonus for 9 sacks. He's going into the week with 8.5. Devin Singletary, he's got a lot of work to do, but currently at 835 rushing yards. If he gets $125,000. Chris Jones, $1.25 million for 10 sacks. He's at 9.5. So make sure you check out that article on OddsShark when it comes, because there's going to be a lot of dudes looking for some potential big paydays if they hit these milestones here.
I got a couple more for you. Odell Beckham, if he plays, the Ravens may be resting players, but 5 catches for another $250,000. Austin Eckler, 110 yards for $100,000. So these things matter. But let me throw this out to you as well, another angle to consider. I don't know if the 49ers are going to start Brock Purdy this week or not, but if they do, you got to like the under props, right? Because he may only play for a half in that game, right? And so it's like, keep an eye on the inactives, keep an eye on what these beat writers are saying, or these coaches may come out right and say, so-and-so will not play. It's like, if some of these starters play, they may not play much, and that's a nice deal for the under. Now, some books know this, and they're not going to allow you to make those bets. They're going to pull the lines, which is why I go back to what I said earlier in the show. Make sure you have multiple books, because some books may allow you to make bets like that.
Let's get into some picks here. I believe we went 3-2-1. What was the push last week?
The push was it was a 3-point push. The Raiders I had +3. They kind of, I was fortunate to get a push on that because they were trailing for most of the game and kind of backdoored me to a push.
All right, well, lead us off here. What's got your eye for Week 18?
All right, give me 3 points with the Bears this week. I think the narrative out there is there's a huge motivation disadvantage here. The Packers are going to be motivated because they want to win. But this is a rivalry game, and I feel like the Bears would love nothing more than to upset the apple cart here. Khalil Herbert is quietly, he's put together probably his 2 best games of the season, his last 2 games. And this Bears team with an effective running game is a totally different team. Bears and Packers played earlier this year. I believe it was week 1, and Justin Fields was their leading rusher by far. They had no semblance of a rushing game. The Packers are going to be seeing a different Bears game coming into this. The Packers are also banged up. They were really banged up last week. Be interesting to see how the injury report shakes out this week. You got to figure a percentage of all those guys who were out last week, some of them are probably going to miss this game as well. And Chicago's defense is so underrated. It's been since November 19th that someone scored over 20 points on them. So give me the Bears +3. Interested in the money line sprinkle as well here.
Very, very interesting. I'm going to have a pick for that game coming up soon, but I want to start with this Tampa Bay Carolina game here. I'm on the Bucs. This is at 5.5. I have it at 5, but Bucs win and they're in. We talked about it. It's as simple as that. This team has played good football for the most part when it's mattered. Crappy game against the Saints, notwithstanding. They won 4 or 5. And with those Saints at home to the terrible Falcons this week, they should be extra motivated as they assume the Saints win. And luckily for the Bucs, they are at the Panthers, the worst team in the National Football League. We all know the resume. The Panthers can't score. They aren't particularly good at stopping other teams from scoring. They're one of the worst spread bets in the NFL this season at 5-10-1 ATS. And yeah, so big bounce back spot here after that disappointing loss to the Saints. 5-2 ATS in the last 7, 7-3 ATS in the last 10 meetings with the Panthers. I think Tampa Bay wins, covers, punches their ticket to the playoffs. And like you said a couple weeks ago, Tony, maybe a team other NFC teams should be a bit wary of early on in these playoffs.
Absolutely. And in that vein, I've got your game in a teaser here. So I'm taking the Bucs teased down, so they just need to win the game. And then I'm taking the Cardinals teased up to plus 8.5. Get me through the key number of the 3, the key number of the 7. I just think this Cardinals team, they're built like a good backdoor cover team. Like if it's garbage time and the other team's in like a prevent defense and Kyler Murray can run around. They've got some decent receivers. I think this is a team that can get you a backdoor cover if they don't win the game outright. And then, like you said, the Buccaneers are going to be more motivated. Now, some people out there are like, Tony's a hypocrite. He just said for the last game not to worry about the motivation angle. Why is he saying the Bucs are motivated here? Well, when you're looking at this motivation angle, you've got to look at the other team. Do they have the roster? Do they have the skill despite the motivation disadvantage to do something? And I just respect the Panthers right now at this point in the season less than I do the Bears. And so that's why in this case, I'm like, the Bucs are going to be more motivated when they're in scenario. I just don't think the Panthers have the juice to do anything in this spot.
All right, here's my Bears-Packers pick. I'm on the other side here. I'm on Pack -3. Like the Bucs, the Pack control their own fate for the postseason. A win here, and they are in. Pack off back-to-back wins coming into this one, winners of 5 and 7, and sort of figuring it out here at the right time. And as far as this quote-unquote rivalry is concerned, forget it. The Packers have dominated Chicago, won and covered in 9 straight, including obviously 38-20 in Chicago in Week 1, 18-2 straight up, and 16-4 ATS in the last 20, 25-5 straight up, and 23-7 ATS in the last 30. And Jordan Love, man, sensational season from him. Just from his last 7 games, 16 TD passes against just 1 pick, rushed for another 2 TDs. Give me the Pack here. I know it's a division game, tough game, sure, but by a field goal, give me the Pack.
Hey, 15th episode, our first time being opposite each other on these picks, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So
I think that's correct.
Well, after this show, we may need to get a little friendly bet on the side and put something down on it just to make it a little more interesting. My last pick here, I like the Titans plus 5.5. I've got a caveat for you though. I wouldn't bet it right now. I think that there's a good chance that this number goes up to +6, so I would wait this out. If it hits the +6, attack it then. If it doesn't go up to +6, I still like it at plus 5.5 as well. What I like here is the Titans are just a much better team at home. They've got a bad overall record, but they're 4-4 at home. And I think part of the reason for that is their offensive line is bad, and bad offensive lines just get exposed on the road. So I think their offensive line, and maybe Will Levis, if he starts, is going to be a lot more comfortable with the home crowd here. Mike Vrabel, as I said before, is a motivator, so I'm not worried about the fact that the Jaguars are going to have a perceived motivation edge here. And the other thing to keep in mind, don't get too cute when you're looking at these and say, oh, here's the point spread, and think that the bookmakers aren't baking in that motivation edge into the number already. If anything, I think this number's inflated because of that. So go ahead and give me the Titans +6 preferably, but I'll take it at plus 5.5. Is it going to be Tannehill? Is it going to be Levis? I'll prefer Tannehill, but I'll be comfortable with Levis in this situation because he looked pretty darn good against the Jaguars earlier this season. 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, one of his better games of the season.
Over to game of the weekend, man. We had 2 good semifinals. I think we're going to have another banger of a final here. Washington, Michigan. Give me Washington plus 4.5 in the national championship game. Just a sensational season from Penix, and he's just come off his best performance, 430 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, season high 31 on the ground, 6-point semifinal win over Texas, and he was completing some beautiful, perfect passes. I was on Washington in that semifinal game right here on the Huddle and called out his veteran poise, his leadership, and he's going to shine again against Michigan. And so while Blake Corum has scored in every game this season, good chance he does it again and, gets his 80 or so yards on the ground or whatever, force J.J. McCarthy to beat you. This guy does not play at the elite level that Penix does, and Michigan favors a sort of old school approach to that offense. Washington doesn't have the greatest defense, but I think they can handle a dose of Harbaugh ball. And I think here, while Michigan does have that great defense, we know this, but this will be the best offense they have faced all season. The Big Ten doesn't sling the ball around like other conferences, so of course their numbers against the pass are going to look good. Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, Michigan State, Iowa, the list goes on and on. Washington is different. Penix is different. Odunze, Polk, McMillan could make a real difference in this game. I fully expect them to. Give me Washington plus the points here in the national championship game.
I like it. I like the passion. Hey, man, last NFL Sunday of the year coming up. People got to soak this up. Don't take it for granted. The playoffs are fun. Don't get me wrong. Can't wait for the Super Bowl. But there's something special about those NFL Sundays, and we're going to have to wait a long time to have a full slate again. So I hope everybody enjoys the games this weekend.
Yeah, and good luck with your bets. You talked about the Ravens potentially resting a lot of dudes, and obviously Lamar comes top of mind. And Tyler Huntley's their number 2. Do you remember last season that Tyler Huntley was a Pro Bowler?
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could do a whole show on how in the world that happens.
Just so hilarious. There you go. I'm not one to pat myself on the back, but I believe I'm 5-1 over the last 2 shows. I called the Michigan-Washington final. I called the Pistons over the Raptors, Tony.
You did.
It happened.
You called it, and it was a couple days before the game. They had another game in between it. They played the Celtics, and that game was closer than we thought. By the way, that went to overtime.
But it really was.
You didn't just predict the upset. You predicted exactly when it was going to happen. That was impressive.
Yeah, it was. If I was the Pistons, I'd have had that one circled on the calendar as the one that they could put an end to that horrific losing streak. So there you go. Whatever you find folks do with your bets this weekend, best of luck. And like Tony said, man, it's the last full NFL Sunday. So drink it in, enjoy the football, enjoy the bets, and we'll see you next week on The Huddle.